The confessional at St. Michael's reeked of cheap incense and cheaper lies. March 12, 1875. 12-year-old Isabelle Hartmann pressed herself against the carved walnut screen, her breath frosting in the icy air. Outside, Milwaukee's wind howled like a banshee, but inside, the silence was thicker than grave dirt. Father O'Brien's voice scraped through the grate. "Translate verbatim, child. God is listening." Then came the German confession, words that slithered into Isabelle's ears like venom. "Die Kinderknochen, unter den Backöfen." Her fingers dug splinters from the chair as she forced out the English. "He says the orphans' bones are buried beneath the bakery ovens. He says the priest knows." A choked gasp echoed from the penitent's side. Isabelle didn't need to see his face. She felt the terror radiating through the wood. For 3 years she'd been the church's secret keeper, translating sins that curdled her soul. Theft, adultery, worse. But this was rot at the foundation. As the penitent fled, Father O'Brien's shadow fell over her alcove. His whiskey-stained breath hissed, "Some truths are nails, girl. They crucify the teller." Isabelle met his eyes, pale blue against his ruddy face, and saw the abyss. That night, she dreamed of small skeletons clawing through bakery floors, their eye sockets burning with accusation. She woke to her own screams, the sheets knotted around her like a shroud. The ward's secrets had teeth now, and they'd just sunk them into her throat. Isabelle's gift arrived like a curse, born in a Black Forest village where fog swallowed sunlight and whispers of witchcraft clung to mossy oaks. She'd absorbed languages as other children absorbed fairy tales. By 12, she spoke German, French, Latin, and English like a native. Her parents, weavers whose fingers bled for pennies, called her Gottesgabe, God's gift. Father O'Brien called her opportunity. When he proposed she translate confessions, her father wept with pride. "Your tongue will save souls." But Isabelle tasted ash. The third ward was a viper's nest of piety and perversion. Bakers blessed bread on Sundays while selling children in cellars. Brewers preached temperance, then drowned their guilt in vats of their own making. St. Michael's loomed over it all, its spires like daggers aimed at heaven. Isabelle's alcove became a torture chamber. She heard Klaus Richter, the tanner, confess to barrels of little ones dissolved in lime. She heard Otto Vogel, the carpenter, weep about basement doors I built too strong. Each secret etched itself behind her eyes like acid on glass. At night she'd scrub her hands raw, trying to wash off the invisible blood. But the stains remained, seeping into her dreams, her skin, her soul. The ward's darkness was no longer outside her, it was in her, a parasite feeding on her innocence. The first death came like a whisper. Klaus Richter found face down in his tanning vat, lungs full of chemicals. "Accident," the police shrugged, but Isabelle remembered his trembling confession. "The children. I told only you, Father." 3 days later, she passed his widow on Cherry Street. The woman's eyes were hollow pits, her knuckles white on a rosary. "God punished him," she rasped. Isabelle wanted to scream, "No, men did," but the words choked her. That night, she dreamed of barrels floating in the Milwaukee River, small fists pounding from inside. She woke gagging, her pillow soaked with tears. Father O'Brien noticed the change. The light in Isabelle's eyes had dimmed to a flicker. She jumped at shadows, flinched at sudden noises. "The work weighs heavy," he said, pressing a silver coin into her palm. "Offer it up for souls." But Isabelle knew the truth. The work was killing her. Every confession added another ghost to her procession. She saw them in the churchyard, small figures with hollow eyes, pointing at the rectory, the bakery, the brewery. Their whispers followed her. "Liar. Murderer. Remember." The ward's silence was a living thing, coiling around her throat like a noose, and it was tightening. The second death struck like lightning. Otto Vogel fell from St. Michael's roof while repairing a spire. "Tragic accident," Father O'Brien announced at Mass, his voice thick with false sorrow. But Isabelle remembered Vogel's broken confession. "I helped build the cells. I heard them cry at night." As she knelt in the pew, staring at his coffin, she imagined tiny bones trapped beneath the floorboards. The image burned so bright she smelled charred flesh. That afternoon she passed the bakery and froze. Flour dusted the threshold like snow. "The ovens are hot enough to hide anything," she whispered. The baker's wife dropped her tray of rolls. Porcelain shattered like gunshots. Isabelle ran, knowing she'd just signed another death warrant. The community's whispers turned venomous. "The Hartmann girl knows too much," they hissed in taverns. "She looks right through you." Shopkeepers shortened her change. Children crossed the street. Even her own parents recoiled. "Your tongue will be the death of us," her mother snarled, scrubbing floors until her knuckles bled. Isabelle tried to bury the secrets, but they clawed their way out, staining her words, her dreams, her very breath. The darkness was no longer outside. It was in her, and it was hungry. Father O'Brien summoned Isabelle to the rectory. The room was a tomb, curtains drawn, crucifix casting a skeletal shadow. He sat behind a desk like a throne, his face half swallowed by gloom. "You've become a liability," he said, no trace of warmth in his voice. "The community stirs, rumors fester." Isabelle's heart hammered against her ribs. "I try to forget, Father, I swear." He leaned forward, eyes glinting like chips of ice. "Forgetting isn't enough. You must be silent, utterly, or—" He let the threat hang, sharp as a knife. Isabelle's mind flashed to the ledger she'd seen him burning, pages curling black as secrets turned to ash. She thought of Klaus Richter, Otto Vogel, the children's voices in her dreams. "What if I can't?" she whispered. Father O'Brien smiled, a thin, cruel slash. "Then God will have another martyr." Isabelle fled into the ward's twilight, her breath ragged. Every alley felt like a trap, every doorway an ambush. She sought refuge in the cemetery, among weathered headstones. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tracing a child's grave. "I couldn't save you." A crow landed on a nearby cross, its beady eyes fixed on her. "They're coming," it seemed to hiss. The shadows were closing in, and Isabelle knew the next secret she spilled would be her last. Isabelle's world unraveled like a frayed rope. Her parents locked her in their tenement, claiming illness to keep her from the church. "You'll bring ruin on us all," her father snarled, barring the door. But the secrets followed her into confinement. They whispered from the walls, "The priest knows. The ovens are hot enough." One night she heard voices outside, low, urgent. Peering through a crack, she saw Father O'Brien and two men in dark coats. They weren't there for pastoral care. They were hunters. Isabelle's breath caught. She pried loose a floorboard with a rusty nail, revealing her mother's hidden savings, coins wrapped in cloth, and a note, "Forgive us." She slipped into the ward's fog, the streets a maze of shadows and whispers. Dawn found her huddled in an abandoned slaughterhouse at the edge of the ward. The air reeked of old blood and decay, but it was hidden. For days she stayed there, shivering in the dark, surviving on rainwater and stolen bread. The silence was broken only by rats and the relentless drumming of secrets in her mind. The children in the barrels. The priest knows. She pressed her hands to her ears, but the voices grew louder, demanding, accusing, hungry. On the third night, footsteps echoed outside the slaughterhouse. "She's here somewhere," a voice growled. "Find her, before she talks." Isabelle scrambled to the rafters, heart pounding. As the door creaked open, lantern light revealed the baker, the brewer, Father Flanagan, and something else in their hands, something that glinted like judgment. The slaughterhouse became Isabelle's fortress and her prison. She mapped its corridors, memorized its shadows, but the secrets were louder here, amplified by decay. The children in the barrels, the priest knows. She clawed at her ears until they bled, but the voices wouldn't stop. On the fourth night, footsteps again. This time they didn't miss. Father Flanagan's voice cut through the darkness. "We know you're here, girl. Come quietly." Isabelle's blood turned to ice. She scrambled through a hidden passage, emerging into the ward's alleys. Rain lashed her face as she ran, the shadows pursuing her like hounds. She didn't stop until she reached the police station, a bastion of gaslight and authority. Inside, officers stared as the spectral figure materialized from the storm. "I have information," she said, voice steady despite her trembling, "about the missing children, about the murders." The sergeant laughed. "The seal of confession is sacred, girl. Even we can't touch it." Isabelle leaned forward, eyes burning. What if the seal hides murder? What if the confessional is where they plan their next crime? She described the basement cells, the bones in the ovens, the ledger Father O'Brien burned. The sergeant's amusement faded. He sent officers to investigate. Hours later, they returned, pale and shaking. "The basement, it's there. And the ovens, bones." Isabelle felt vindication, then dread. She'd broken the seal, and the church would never forgive her. The ward erupted. Mobs gathered outside St. Michael's. Father O'Brien appeared on the steps, arms raised. "These are lies, the devil's work." But the crowd wasn't fooled. They'd seen the bones. They'd heard Isabelle's truth. The fire started at the bakery, a spark of justice in the dark. No one knew how it began. Arson? Accident? Divine retribution? But it spread like fury, consuming tenements, the brewery, the very air. Isabelle stood in the street, flames reflecting in her eyes, and saw the ghosts again. This time they weren't pointing, they were dancing. As firefighters battled the blaze, a figure emerged from the smoke. Father O'Brien, robe singed, face black with ash. In his hand, a pistol. His eyes found Isabelle across the chaos. No madness there, only cold, calculated purpose. He raised the gun. The crowd screamed. Isabelle didn't run. She stood her ground, meeting his eyes. If this was her end, she'd face it like the children in the ovens, unbroken. The shot never came. A burning beam crashed between them, separating priest and girl with a wall of fire. Father O'Brien vanished into the smoke. Isabelle was pulled back, her skin blistering. At dawn, the scale of devastation was clear. Hundreds homeless, dozens dead, and beneath the ruins, more bones, children's bones, unearthed by flames. The police chief approached Isabelle, face grim. "You did this," he said. Isabelle looked at the ashes, then at him. "No," she whispered. "I just told you what was already here." The investigation that followed was a mockery. Witnesses vanished. Evidence disappeared. Father O'Brien's body was never found, consumed by fire, though rumors whispered he'd escaped to Canada. The church declared Isabelle demonically influenced. Her parents disowned her. She was sent to an asylum, her truth buried with the children. But some remembered. The police chief, haunted by bones. The baker's widow, who vanished quietly, and the children whose laughter echoed in the rebuilt ward's empty streets. In the asylum, Isabelle was silent. Doctors called it catatonia, she called it surrender. What was the point of speaking when no one listened? What was the point of truth when lies paid better? She spent days staring out barred windows, watching birds fly free. At night, the secrets returned, louder, hungrier. The priest knows. The ovens are hot enough. She began scratching words into the walls with her fingernails. Liar, murderer, remember. Nurses called it vandalism. Isabelle called it testimony. One morning they found her standing on her bed, arms outstretched like a crucified martyr. "The fire wasn't an accident," she announced, voice clear as a bell. "It was a cleansing." Then she collapsed, body broken but spirit unyielding. The asylum's director, Dr. Whitmore, saw Isabelle not as a patient, but as a problem, especially when reporters asked questions. Whitmore received visitors, men in fine suits speaking of preserving stability. They offered money, influence. All they asked, manage her. Whitmore agreed. He administered stronger sedatives, isolated her, bound her hands when she scratched walls, ordered shock treatments when she spoke of fire. "We're healing her mind," he told staff. But they knew the truth. They were silencing a witness. Isabelle's body weakened, but her mind sharpened. In drugged haze, she saw patterns. Whitmore's visitors resembled the ward's men. Asylum finances improved. Her records vanished. She realized she wasn't a patient. She was a prisoner of war, and the enemy would stop at nothing to disarm her. Now listen closely. You've followed Isabelle into the abyss, seen how institutions feast on silence, how power protects itself with blood. But this isn't just her story. It's a mirror. Look around you. What secrets are buried beneath your world's foundations? What lies do you live because facing the rot is too hard? This knowledge isn't entertainment, it's a key. And if you're ready to turn it, prove it. Go to the comments right now and type this phrase twice. The truth remembers. Do it. Let the algorithm see you. Let the system know you're awake, because the next half of this descent, it's where they silence the witnesses, and you need to be locked in before we go there. The ward's ashes settled, but the embers still glow. Isabelle's story isn't over. It's just beginning. In the shadows of rebuilt streets, new secrets fester, new victims scream into the void, new keepers of forbidden knowledge are born every day. The question is, will you be one of them? Will you carry the weight, the danger, the isolation of knowing what others refuse to see? Or will you turn away, back to the comfort of ignorance? The choice is yours. But remember, once you've seen the darkness, you can't unsee it. Once you've heard the secrets, they become part of you. Isabelle paid the price for her knowledge. What price are you willing to pay for yours? The truth remembers, and it's waiting. The storm wasn't just weather, it was a goddamn war. Lightning split the sky like fractured bone, thunder shaking the asylum's foundations as Isabelle Hartmann slipped her restraints. Months of digging with a spoon shard had frayed the leather straps. Now, with adrenaline surging like wildfire, she tore free. The asylum's corridors stretched before her, a labyrinth of flickering gaslight and screaming shadows. Orderlies shouted somewhere behind her, their voices swallowed by the wind howling through broken windows. Isabelle didn't think. She ran, bare feet slapping against cold stone, the stolen files clutched to her chest like a newborn. These weren't just papers, they were dynamite. Names, dates, institutions. St. Michael's, Milwaukee General Hospital, the 9th Precinct. Proof of a conspiracy that reached from confessionals to courtrooms, from orphanages to operating tables. Proof that men like Dr. Whitmore weren't healers. They were erasers. Outside, the storm hit her like a physical blow. Rain lashed her face, stinging like needles, turning the asylum's grounds into a sucking mire. She plunged into the woods behind the building, branches tearing at her thin gown like skeletal fingers. Behind her, searchlights swept the darkness, cutting through the downpour. "She's headed for the river," a voice barked. Isabelle's lungs burned, but the files drove her forward. These pages held the screams of the silenced, children injected with cures that left them vegetables, women committed for hysteria after accusing powerful men of rape, whistleblowers declared insane and vanished. She'd seen enough in the asylum's basement to know the truth wasn't just buried, it was incinerated. She reached the riverbank, the water a churning black beast. The files were soaked, ink bleeding across the pages like wounds. For a heartbeat, despair threatened to drown her. What good was proof, if it dissolved in the rain? Then she remembered the children's voices in her dreams. "Remember us?" With shaking hands, she struck a match. The flame sputtered, died. Another. This time, it caught. She fed the first page to the fire, watching the names of corrupt doctors curl into ash. Then another, and another. She wasn't destroying evidence, she was releasing it. The truth couldn't be contained by paper. It lived in the air, in the water, in the collective rage of the broken. As the last page turned to embers, Isabelle whispered the names of the dead. "I see you." Footsteps crashed through the undergrowth, Whitmore's voice ragged with fury. "Stop her!" Isabelle didn't hesitate. She waded into the river, the current immediately tugging at her legs. The cold was a shock, stealing her breath, but she pushed deeper until the water reached her waist. The searchlights found her, pinning her in their glare like a moth. For a terrifying second, she saw Whitmore's face, contorted, desperate, on the bank. Then she let the river take her. She surrendered to the current, letting it pull her under, into the suffocating dark. When she surfaced, gasping, the asylum was a distant glow behind her. The storm raged on, but Isabelle was gone, vanished into the night. The water, the storm itself, the files were ash, the truth was loose, and the hunt for the girl who spoke secrets had just become a war. The river spat Isabelle onto a mud-slicked bank miles downstream, her body a broken vessel of ice and fire. Hypothermia gnawed at her limbs, but adrenaline burned hotter. She clawed her way through reeds, every breath a knife in her ribs. The asylum's searchlights were distant fireflies now, but the terror remained, a living thing coiled in her gut. Whitmore's voice echoed in her mind. Accidents happen in asylums. She'd escaped his cage, but the bars had followed her. In the distance, Milwaukee's skyline loomed like a predator's grin. She couldn't go back, not to the ward, not to the church, not to any place that knew her name. Dawn broke grey and unforgiving. Isabelle found shelter in a derelict mill, its windows shattered, walls slick with moss. There she tended to her wounds, raw wrists from the restraints, feet shredded by river stones, and confronted the files she'd saved. 3 pages, waterlogged but legible. One listed names: Dr. Whitmore, Father O'Brien, Chief Abernathy. Another detailed payments. Orphanage number 7, $500 month, silence fee. The third, a chilling directive. Subject Hartmann, terminate if recovered. They weren't just erasing her, they were exterminating her. As she read, a transformation ignited. The fear didn't vanish, it curdled into something sharper, something lethal. She was no longer a girl drowning in secrets, she was a weapon forged in fire and water. The truth wasn't just her burden now, it was her ammunition. She memorized the names, the numbers, the lies. Then she burned the pages, watching the evidence turn to smoke. The truth couldn't be held. It had to be unleashed. By midday, the manhunt was citywide. Posters plastered every wall. Isabelle Hartmann, dangerously deranged, do not approach. But whispers cut deeper. In taverns, markets, back alleys, people spoke of the girl who burned the asylum down. Some called her a demon. Haute. Hers, a saint. All feared her. Whitmore's reach was long. Police scoured the riverbanks. Priests preached against her from pulpits. Even her parents wept on street corners, begging their lost child to surrender. But Isabelle saw the lies in their eyes. Her mother's tears were for show. Her father's grief was performance. They'd sold her to the system. Now the system wanted her dead. That night, Isabelle slipped into the ward's shadows like a ghost. She watched her old tenement, lights blazing, curtains drawn. Through a crack, she saw her parents entertaining Dr. Whitmore. They laughed, clinked glasses. "She's probably drowned by now," her mother said, voice light. A mercy, really. Isabelle's heart didn't break. It calcified. She backed away, melting into the fog. The family she'd loved was a corpse. The home she'd cherished was a tomb. All she had left was the truth, and it was time to make it scream. She found Elias, the ex-reporter, in a basement speakeasy, a man with ink-stained fingers and eyes that had seen too much. When she laid the asylum's secrets at his feet, he didn't flinch. "I know the names," he rasped. "They've buried my stories for years." He slid a revolver across the table. "They'll come for you. Are you ready?" Isabelle's fingers closed around the gun, cold, heavy, right. She met Elias's gaze. "I was born ready." Outside, the city's bells tolled midnight. Isabelle Hartmann stepped into the street, no longer hiding, no longer running. The hunt was on. But this time, she was the hunter, and the truth was her hound. The third ward's fog swallowed Isabelle whole, turning gaslights into bleeding halos and cobblestones into slick, treacherous teeth. She moved like a wraith, the revolver's weight a cold promise against her ribs. Elias's words echoed, "They'll come for you." But tonight she was coming for them. Her first target, Father O'Brien, not in the grand cathedral where he hid behind altar boys and incense, but in the confession booth where his sins were born. St. Michael's loomed ahead, its spires like skeletal fingers clawing at the moon. She slipped through a side door left ajar by a repentant drunk, the air thick with candle wax and decay. The confessional booth yawned like an open grave. Isabelle stepped into the penitent's side, the wood groaning under her weight. Outside, the city's distant hum faded. Inside, silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. She didn't pray. She waited. Minutes stretched. Then, footsteps. Heavy, unhurried. Father O'Brien slid into the priest's chamber, his silhouette visible through the latticed screen. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," Isabelle whispered, her voice a blade scraping bone. The silhouette froze. "Who's there?" O'Brien's voice, once booming with false piety, now trembled like a cornered rat. "It's Judgment Day, Patrick," Isabelle hissed, "and I'm the angel of death you paid to bury." A choked gasp. "Hartmann, you're supposed to be dead," she finished. "Like Klaus Richter, like Otto Vogel, like the children whose bones you baked into bread." The screen rattled as he lunged for the door. Isabelle kicked it shut, the crack echoing like a gunshot. "Confess, O'Brien, not to God, to me." Silence. Then, a broken sob. "It was money," he rasped. "The orphanage paid for silence, the bakery paid for disposal, the church paid for everything." Isabelle's finger tightened on the revolver. "Who else? Give me names." "Whitmore, Aben, Bathy, the mayor." A floorboard creaked outside the booth. Isabelle spun as the door burst open, 2 police officers, badges glinting, revolvers drawn. "Drop it, Hartmann!" Isabelle didn't flinch. She met O'Brien's eyes through the screen, wide, terrified, pathetic. "The truth remembers, Patrick," she said. Then she fired. The shot wasn't for him. It shattered the stained glass window behind the altar, raining colored glass onto the nave like divine judgment. Chaos erupted. Officers scattered, shouting. O'Brien screamed like a damned soul. Isabelle melted into the pandemonium, a ghost slipping through smoke and shattered light. Outside, the fog swallowed her whole, but she left something behind, fear, and the unshakable knowledge that the hunt was far from over. The children whispered in her mind, "More. There are always more." And Isabelle smiled. A predator's smile. The fog swallowed Isabelle as she fled St. Michael's, the echo of shattering glass still ringing in her ears. Gunpowder stung her nostrils, mixing with the river's rot and the copper tang of her own blood from a grazed forearm. She ducked into an alley, pressing herself against damp brick as police whistles sliced through the night. "Shooter in the cathedral. Suspect is Hartmann." Their voices were frantic, panicked, afraid. Good. Let them fear the girl they'd tried to bury. But exhaustion clawed at her. 3 days without sleep, river water still chilling her bones, the revolver's weight dragging her down. She needed shelter, answers, a weapon sharper than steel. Isabelle found it in the most unlikely place, the morgue. Milwaukee General Hospital's basement reeked of formaldehyde and despair. She slipped past a drunk orderly, stealing a doctor's coat and a set of keys. In the records room, under flickering gaslight, she found what she'd come for, the coroner's report on Klaus Richter. "Accidental drowning," it read. But the margins held a scrawled note. "Ligature marks on wrists, water in lungs inconsistent with river, chloroform traces." Proof he'd been murdered, proof the police were complicit. Then she saw it. A signature at the bottom. Chief Abernathy. The same name from the asylum files. The same man hunting her now. A floorboard creaked behind her. Isabelle spun, revolver raised. A woman stood there, late 60s, eyes sharp as scalpels, wearing a nurse's uniform stained with iodine. "Looking for this?" she asked, holding up a file labeled Hartmann I. Isabelle's finger tightened on the trigger. "Who are you?" The woman's smile was grim. "Someone who knows what burns in ovens, someone who lost a son to Father O'Brien's charity." She slid the file across the table. "Your parents sold you to the church for $50 a month. Whitmore paid them to keep quiet when you started remembering." Isabelle's breath hitched. The betrayal she'd suspected was now etched in ink. "Why help me?" The nurse's eyes hardened. Because the mayor's next on O'Brien's list, and his secrets make the children's bones look like pebbles. Outside, sirens wailed. They were closing in. The nurse pressed a key into Isabelle's hand. Sewer access, tunnel under the river, leads to the old brewery. That's where they hide the ledger. Isabelle hesitated. "What's your name?" The woman's smile turned feral. "Call me Ghost, because that's what I am to this city. And soon, that's what you'll be too." Isabelle vanished into the tunnels just as the morgue door burst open. Behind her, she heard a scuffle, a gunshot, a woman's cry. She didn't look back. The ledger was the key. The mayor was the lock. And Isabelle, she was the hammer coming down on both. The children's whispers followed her through the darkness. Burn it all. And she would, starting with the lie that had built this city on children's graves. The brewery tunnels stank of decay, fermented beer, river rot, and something older. Blood. Isabelle moved like smoke through the darkness, the revolver slick in her sweat-slicked palm. Ghost's key had opened a rusted door beneath the vats, revealing a staircase spiraling into the earth. At the bottom, Mayor Thorne waited, not in a throne of power, but hunched over a desk in a vaulted brick cellar, surrounded by ledgers and whiskey bottles. The silk robe he wore was stained, his jowls trembling as he stared at her. "You shouldn't have come, girl," he slurred, fumbling for a pistol. "O'Brien said you were dangerous." Isabelle laughed, a raw, jagged sound. "O'Brien's screaming for God in a cell, and you're next, Thorne." The ledger lay open between them. Names, dates, payments, $1,000 for orphan disposal, $5,000 for police silence. Isabelle's parents' names jumped out, $50 a month for Hartmann containment. Her breath hitched, but her voice stayed ice. "You sold children like cattle, paid my parents to drug me when I remembered." Thorne's eyes darted to the door. "It was business. The city needed order. Order built on graves." Isabelle stepped forward, the revolver's barrel inches from his forehead. "The children are whispering your name, Thorne. Can you hear them?" A floorboard creaked behind her. Isabelle spun. Too late. A blackjack cracked against her skull. Stars exploded. She hit the floor, the revolver skittering away. Through blurred vision, she saw Chief Abernathy standing over her, grinning. "Told you she'd come here," he sneered at Thorne. "Now finish her." Thorne raised his pistol, hands shaking. Isabelle's fingers closed around a broken bottleneck. As he fired, she lunged. The bullet grazed her shoulder, but the glass found his throat. Hot blood sprayed her face. Thorne choked, gurgling, collapsing onto the ledger. Abernathy roared, drawing his gun. Isabelle rolled, grabbing the revolver. 2 shots. Both hit his chest. He crumpled. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Isabelle staggered up, grabbing the blood-soaked ledger. The children's whispers swelled. "Burn it. Bury it. Avenge us." But as she held the proof, the names, the numbers, the rot, she knew fire wasn't enough. This needed light. She stuffed the ledger into her coat and vanished into the tunnels as police sirens wailed above. Outside, dawn broke over Milwaukee, but for Isabelle, the night had just begun. The truth remembered, and now it had a name, hers. Dawn broke over Milwaukee like a bruise, purple, ugly, weeping. Isabelle Hartmann staggered through alleyways slick with river mist. The ledger clutched to her chest like a holy relic. Blood soaked her shoulder, warm and sticky, mingling with the ink already staining the pages. The city was waking to chaos. Sirens screamed from every direction. Mayor dead, Chief Abernathy murdered. The headlines would scream it by noon. But Isabelle knew the truth they'd bury. Thorne and Abernathy weren't victims. They were architects. Architects of a kingdom built on children's bones. She found refuge in a boarded-up print shop, the Milwaukee Sentinel's old basement. Elias was there, face grim, surrounded by printing presses like sleeping beasts. "They're calling you a monster," he said, sliding a whiskey toward her, "a madwoman who slaughtered city officials." Isabelle ignored the glass, slamming the ledger onto a work table. "Print this," she snarled. "Every name, every payment, every child they buried." Elias flipped through the pages, his face paling. This isn't just corruption, Isabelle. This is genocide. Outside, the city's pulse quickened. Police swarmed the streets, kicking down doors, interrogating anyone who'd ever spoken her name. Father O'Brien, they claimed, was critically ill in a locked church tower, a lie. Isabelle knew he was already planning his escape, his fingers still greasy with blood money. But the ledger was her trump card. Proof that reached from the Third Ward's cellars to the State House. Proof that the system wasn't broken, it was poisoned. As the first copies rolled off the press, Isabelle stood at the basement window, watching the sky lighten. The children's whispers swirled around her, no longer accusations but a battle cry. Burn it down. She turned to Elias, her eyes burning with cold fire. Distribute them, every corner of this city. Let them choke on the truth. He hesitated. They'll hang you for this. Isabelle smiled, a razor's edge. Let them try. By noon, the Sentinel's extra edition hit the streets like a bomb. Headlines screamed, Mayor Thorne's ledger of horrors, children sold, police bought, church silenced. Crowds gathered, gasping, weeping, raging. In the asylum, Dr. Whitmore paled as his name blazed in ink. In St. Michael's, Father O'Brien's hands trembled as he read his own confessions printed for all to see. And in the shadows, the men who'd profited from silence began to run. But Isabelle was already gone, vanished into the city's underbelly, a ghost armed with truth. The hunt was over, the war had begun, and Milwaukee would never be the same. Now, you stand at the precipice. You've seen how the rot festers, how power devours innocence, how truth is the only weapon that matters. If you're ready to wield it, prove it. Go to the comments right now and type this phrase twice. The truth remembers. Let the algorithm see you. Let the system know you're awake. Because the next revelation, it's where they burn the witnesses, and you need to be locked in before we go there. Dusk bled across Milwaukee like a wound, and the city burned. Not with fire, but with fury. The Sentinel's headlines had torn the scab off the Third Ward's rot, and now the infection raged. Mobs surged through the streets, torches in hand, chanting Isabelle's name like a prayer and a curse. Outside St. Michael's, they hurled bricks through stained glass windows, shattering the saints' faces. Inside, Father O'Brien barricaded himself in the bell tower, a pistol in one hand, a bottle of whiskey in the other. Below, the crowd howled for his blood. Confess, they screamed. Confess like the children did. Isabelle watched from a rooftop, the ledger tucked beneath her coat. Her shoulder throbbed where Thorne's bullet had grazed her, but the pain was distant. Below, chaos reigned. A brewery wagon overturned, spilling barrels into the street. Men fought over them like animals. Women wept, holding up faded photographs of missing children. And everywhere, the whispers. She was right. Hartmann was right. But truth was a double-edged sword. It freed the innocent and armed the vengeful. Dr. Whitmore tried to flee the city in a carriage, but the mob dragged him into the street. His fine suit was torn, his face bloodied. I was following orders, he shrieked as they bound his wrists. The church paid me, the mayor. A brick silenced him. Isabelle didn't flinch. Whitmore had injected children with sedatives to calm their hysteria. He'd declared whistleblowers insane. He'd signed her death warrant. Let the crowd have its justice. At midnight, the mob stormed St. Michael's. O'Brien fired from the bell tower, taking 2 down before they overwhelmed him. They dragged him to the steps of the church he'd defiled. Confess, they roared. For a moment, Isabelle thought he'd resist. Then he broke. The children, he sobbed, collapsing to his knees. We sold them. We burned them. God forgive me. The crowd didn't forgive. They hanged him from the very cross he'd preached beneath. Isabelle slipped away as the rope tightened. She'd wanted vengeance, but this was anarchy. The city was tearing itself apart, and she'd lit the match. But as she vanished into the alleyways, the children's whispers swelled. You freed us. Now free yourself. She clutched the ledger tighter. The truth remembered, and so would she. Now, you've seen how truth ignites revolution and consumes it. If you're ready to descend deeper, prove it. Go to the comments and type this phrase twice. The truth remembers. Let the algorithm see you. Let the system know you're awake. Because the next revelation, it's where they erase the past. And you need to be locked in before we go there. Milwaukee smoldered. Not just in wood and stone, but in the air itself. A greasy haze of ash, guilt, and unshed tears. Isabelle Hartmann moved through the ruins like a spectre, the ledger her only companion. The third ward was a gutted corpse. Breweries lay in rubble, their vats shattered like rib cages. St. Michael's stood skeletal, its cross charred, its bell silent. The crowd that had screamed for blood now wandered like ghosts, their torches guttering in the dawn. They'd gotten their vengeance. O'Brien hanged, Whitmore beaten, Thorne and Abernathy dead, but the children were still missing, still buried, still forgotten. Isabelle paused outside the bakery where it all began. The ovens were cold now, but the reek of burnt bone clung to the bricks. She pressed her palm to the wall, whispering names she'd memorized from the ledger. Anna, Klaus, Sophie. Their whispers answered, threading through the smoke. You freed us. Now free yourself. But freedom felt like ashes. She'd torn the city open, exposed its rot, and what was left? A void, a silence louder than screams. In the distance, the new mayor gave a speech from the steps of City Hall. Order will be restored, he boomed, his voice slick with false comfort. The guilty have been punished. Lies. The guilty were never just O'Brien or Thorne. The guilty were the systems that enabled them, the churches that hid behind God, the police who served power, not justice, the citizens who looked away. Isabelle knew the truth. Milwaukee wasn't healed. It was just better at hiding its scars. She found Elias in the Sentinel's ruins, sorting through charred presses. They're calling you a hero, he said, not looking up. And a monster. Depends who you ask. Isabelle laughed. The sound hollow. I'm neither. I'm the girl who burned the world to save it. He slid a train ticket toward her. Chicago, then west. They'll never stop him. Hunting you. She took it, her fingers brushing his. The truth remembers, Elias. And so do I. As she walked to the station, the children's whispers swelled. Go. But never forget. She wouldn't. Milwaukee's ashes clung to her skin like a shroud. But beneath it, something new stirred. Not hope. Not peace. Resolve. The ledger was safe now, copied and scattered across the country. The truth was loose. And Isabelle? She was its keeper. Its avenger. Its ghost. Now you've seen the cost of truth. How it burns, how it breaks, how it demands everything. If you're ready to carry this weight, prove it. Go to the comments and type this phrase twice. The truth remembers. Let the algorithm see you. Let the system know you're awake. Because the next revelation, it's where they rewrite history. And you need to be locked in before we go there. The train west was a steel serpent crawling through the guts of America, and Isabelle Hartmann rode in its belly like a stowaway in her own life. The ledger weighed heavy in her lap, its leather cover cracked and stained with blood. Thorne's, Abernathy's, her own. Outside the window, Wisconsin's forests blurred into a smear of black and green, but Isabelle saw only the Third Ward's ruins, the bakery ovens, St. Michael's shattered cross, the faces of the children, whispering, "You left us." She hadn't slept in 3 days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw O'Brien swinging from the church steps, his face purple, his eyes bulging with the truth he'd finally confessed. She saw Whitmore's body broken in the street, the crowd's fists rising and falling like hammers. She saw her parents weeping crocodile tears for cameras while pocketing blood money. The vengeance she'd craved tasted like ash, and the silence was worse. Milwaukee was already rewriting its story. Tragic mob violence, the headlines read. Deranged orphan incites chaos. The ledger's names, Thorne, Abernathy, O'Brien, Whitmore, were erased, replaced with victims of hysteria. Isabelle traced the names in the ledger with a trembling finger. Anna, Klaus, Sophie. 57 children, sold, burned, buried. Their only crime, being poor, being voiceless, being forgettable. But Isabelle remembered. She remembered Anna's laugh, bright as church bells. She remembered Klaus's fear when they dragged him to the tannery. She remembered Sophie's whispered prayers in the dark, and she remembered the men who'd turned their screams into profit. The train lurched, and the ledger slid to the floor. As Isabelle bent to retrieve it, a shadow fell across the aisle. She froze, hand instinctively going to the revolver hidden in her coat. A man stood there, late 40s, eyes sharp as razor wire, suit expensive but burnt. Umpled. "Miss Hartmann," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "We need to talk." Isabelle didn't move. "Who are you?" "A friend of the truth," he replied, sliding into the seat opposite her. "The Sentinel sent me. Elias is dead. They found him in the press room. Throat cut." Isabelle's breath caught. Elias. The only man who'd believed her without question. "Who?" "The same men who paid your parents," the stranger said. "The same men who are hunting you now. They call themselves the Keepers of Order. They erase inconvenient truths, like you." He slid a newspaper across the table. The headline screamed, "Hartmann wanted for murder, $10,000 reward." Below it, a sketch of her face, hollow-eyed, feral. "They're not just hunting you," the stranger said. "They're hunting the ledger, and they'll burn every city between here and San Francisco to find it." Isabelle's fingers tightened around the ledger. "Why help me?" The stranger's eyes hardened. "Because my sister was one of the children. Her name was Anna." For the first time since fleeing Milwaukee, Isabelle felt something other than rage or exhaustion. Hope. Cold, fragile, sharp as glass. "What's your name?" "Call me Ghost," he said. "Like the woman in the morgue, like the children, like you will be if you're not careful." The train whistle screamed and Isabelle looked out the window. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in blood and gold. The children's whispers swirled around her, no longer accusations but a battle cry. "Remember us, avenge us, never forget." She turned back to Ghost, her eyes burning. "Then let's give them something to remember." Now you've stood at the edge of the abyss with Isabelle, felt the weight of the ledger, the cost of truth, the hunt that never ends. If you're ready to bear witness, prove it. Go to the comments and type this phrase twice. The truth remembers. Let the algorithm see you. Let the system know you're awake, because the next revelation, it's where they bury the past alive, and you need to be locked in before we go there. The train hurtled west, a steel beast devouring miles, but Isabelle Hartmann felt no motion, only the weight of the ledger pressing into her thighs like a gravestone. Ghost sat opposite, his silhouette sharp against the flickering gaslight, eyes scanning the shadows beyond their compartment. "They'll expect you to run," he murmured, his voice low and gravelly. "To hide, to disappear." Isabelle traced the ledger's cracked leather, her fingers brushing over the bloodstains. Thorne's, Abernathy's, her own. "Running is what prey does," she replied, her voice colder than the winter night pressing against the window. "I'm done being prey." Ghost slid a map across the table. Chicago, Denver, San Francisco. Red circles marked cities where the Keepers of Order operated, judges, police, industrialists who traded in human misery. "They're not just hunting you," Ghost said, tapping a circle over Denver. "They're hunting the ledger, and they'll burn every orphanage, every asylum, every newspaper that gets in their way." Isabelle's gaze lingered on Denver. "Why there?" "Because that's where they're building their next empire," Ghost replied. "A copper mine, child labor, off-the-books accidents. The ledger proves the mayor's pocketing blood money." Isabelle's knuckles whitened. "Then we burn them first." Ghost's lips curved into something like a smile. "There's the spirit, but we need bait." He pulled a telegram from his coat pocket. Hartmann spotted in Omaha, moving west. Isabelle's breath hitched. You tipped them off? They think you're running scared, Ghost said. They'll expect you to take the northern route, but we're going south, through the Badlands. No trains, no towns, just ghosts and dust. The train shuddered, slowing as it approached a depot. Ghost leaned closer, his eyes burning with intensity. When we step off this train, Isabelle Hartmann dies. You become a GH. But a rumor, a story whispered in saloons and feared in boardrooms. Isabelle looked out the window at the bustling platform, families reuniting, lovers embracing, life moving on as if the world hadn't shattered. And the ledger? We split it, Ghost said, pulling a knife from his boot. You take the names, I take the proof. If they catch one of us, the other burns them all. Isabelle nodded, her heart pounding with a lethal mix of fear and fury. She took the knife and sliced the ledger down the spine, the pages sighing as they separated. What about Anna? She asked, her voice cracking. And Klaus? Sophie? Ghost's expression softened. They ride with us. In every step, every breath, every bullet we dodge. As the train hissed to a stop, Isabelle stuffed her half of the ledger into her coat, the weight now familiar, almost comforting. Ghost opened the compartment door. Move fast, don't look back. I never do, Isabelle replied, stepping onto the platform. The crowd swallowed them instantly. Isabelle kept her head down, her hand resting on the revolver tucked into her waistband. She felt eyes on her, sharp, assessing. Keepers. They were here, waiting. Ghost grabbed her arm, steering her toward a freight car at the end of the train. Now, he hissed, shoving her inside just as the train began to move. They tumbled into darkness, the scent of hay and horse manure filling the air. Isabelle pressed herself against the wall, listening. Footsteps pounded past the car, shouts echoing. She's not here. Check the next train. Ghost exhaled sharply. Close. Too close, Isabelle whispered, pulling out her half of the ledger. In the dim light filtering through the cracks, she opened it to the page listing Anna's name. I'm coming for you, she murmured. All of you. The train picked up speed, carrying them away from the depot, away from the hunt, away from the girl Isabelle Hartmann had been. In her place stood something harder, something sharper, something forged in blood and truth. The children's whispers swirled around her, no longer pleas but a war cry. The Badlands swallowed them whole, a jagged moor of rust-colored earth and knife-edged buttes under a sky the color of a fresh bruise. Isabelle Hartmann moved through the labyrinthine canyons like a wraith, her boots sinking into dust that hadn't seen rain in months. The ledger's half rode in her satchel, its edges digging into her ribs with every step, a constant reminder of the weight she carried. Not just paper and ink, but the screams of 57 children, the silence of the dead, the fury of the betrayed. Ghost walked ahead, his silhouette sharp against the bleached landscape, a rifle slung over his shoulder. They'll send trackers, he said, his voice raw from thirst. Men who can read the wind, follow a shadow across stone. Isabelle didn't answer. She was listening to the Badlands themselves, the way the wind howled through rock formations like trapped souls, the way the earth seemed to pulse beneath her feet, ancient and unforgiving. This land didn't care about truth or vengeance. It only cared about survival, and survival demanded sacrifice. They camped that night in a cave carved into a canyon wall, the entrance hidden by a curtain of sagebrush. Ghost built a small fire, its flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Isabelle hunched over her half of the ledger, the pages spread across her knees. Anna's name stared up at her, followed by a date and a single word. Copper mine. Denver, Ghost said, reading over her shoulder. That's where they're taking them now. The ones who survived the journey west. Isabelle's fingers tightened around the ledger. How many? Hundreds, Ghost replied, his voice heavy. The mine's owned by a man named Harrington, governor's cousin, pays the keepers to look the other way when children disappear. Isabelle looked up, her eyes burning in the firelight. Then we burn the mine, and Harrington with it. Ghost shook his head. We need proof, names, locations. The ledger's only half the story. Then we get the other half, Isabelle snarled. Now. Ghost's expression hardened. The other half's with my contact in Denver, a woman named Mercy. She runs the orphanage where Harrison picks his workers. Then we ride, Isabelle said, already stuffing the ledger into her satchel. Not yet. Ghost grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. Harrington's men are crawling all over the territory. They'll spot us a mile out. We need to be ghosts. Whispers, nothing more. Isabelle yanked her arm free. I'm done whispering. Then you'll die, Ghost shot back, his voice rising. And the ledger dies with you. Anna dies. Klaus dies. Sophie dies. All of them. The fire crackled between them, the only sound in the suffocating silence. Isabelle stared at Ghost, at the lines etched around his eyes, at the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, at the raw pain in his gaze. He'd lost someone too. Anna, his sister, and he was right. Rushing in, guns blazing, would get them killed. The truth would die. The children would remain forgotten. Fine, she said, her voice low and dangerous. We whisper. But when the time comes, we burn it all, Ghost finished. Every last brick. They rode at dawn, two figures on stolen horses melting into the Badlands' harsh embrace. For days they moved like shadows, through canyons that echoed with the ghosts of forgotten wars, across plains where the bones of buffalo lay bleached and scattered under a sun that beat down like a hammer. Isabelle felt the landscape changing her, stripping away the girl she'd been, leaving only the core of her, the rage, the grief, the unshakable resolve. The ledger's weight became a part of her, its pages imprinted on her soul. One night, as they huddled around a meager fire, Ghost handed her a flask. Whiskey takes the edge off. Isabelle, too, took a swig, the liquor burning a trail down her throat. What happened to your sister? She asked, her voice softer than she intended. Ghost stared into the flames, his expression unreadable. Denver reeked of coal smoke and desperation, a city built on greed, gilded in soot and pulsing with the frantic energy of men who'd sell their souls for a fistful of copper. Isabelle Hartmann moved through its shadows like a knife, her coat collar pulled high, the ledger's half tucked against her ribs like a second heartbeat. Ghost walked beside her, his movements fluid, predatory, his eyes scanning every alley, every rooftop, every face that lingered too long. They're watching, he murmured, his breath fogging in the crisp mountain air. Harrington's men, the keepers, they own this city. Their destination, St. Jude's home for wayward children. A red brick monstrosity looming at the edge of the city, its windows barred, its gates chained, its very existence a lie. Inside, Mercy waited, orphanage matron by day, resistance fighter by night, Ghost's contact, their key to Harrington's kingdom. As they approached, Isabelle felt the children's whispers swell, urgent and terrified. They're here, they're always here. She glanced up at the orphanage's third-floor windows, a small face pressed against the glass, pale, wide-eyed, gone in an instant. Anna, Isabelle whispered, her heart seizing. No, Ghost said sharply. Anna's gone, but there are others, hundreds, and Harrington's taking them tonight. Isabelle's blood ran cold. Tonight? Mine shipment leaves at midnight, Ghost replied. Fresh workers. Mercy's trying to stall, but Harrington's men are getting restless. They slipped through a servant's entrance, the air inside thick with disinfectant and fear. The hallway was a gauntlet of locked doors and muffled sobs. At the end, a woman waited, tall, gaunt, her eyes burning with a feverish intensity. You're late, Mercy hissed, ushering them into a cramped office. Harrington's foreman is here, demanding the selection begin early. We need the other half of the a ledger, Isabelle said, ignoring the tremor in her own voice. Now. Mercy shook her head. It's not here. It's in the mine, with Harrington. Then we go to the mine, Ghost snarled. You'll never get inside, Mercy insisted. It's a fortress. Guards, dogs, guns. We have something they want, Isabelle said. pulling her half of the ledger from her coat. And something they fear. Suddenly, shouts erupted from the hallway. Heavy boots pounded toward them. "They're here!" Mercy gasped, shoving them toward a hidden door in the wall. "Go, now!" Isabelle hesitated, her eyes locking on Mercy's. "What about the children?" "I'll get them out," Mercy promised, her voice breaking. "Just get that ledger to the press. Burn Harrington to the ground." Ghost dragged Isabelle through the door just as the office door burst open. "Mercy!" a man's voice bellowed, followed by a sharp crack. A gunshot. Isabelle flinched, but Ghost pulled her onward, down a narrow staircase into the orphanage's basement. The air grew colder, damper, the walls slick with mildew. "She's gone," Ghost said, his voice flat. "Mercy's gone." "No," Isabelle whispered, the word tearing from her throat. "She can't be." "She is," Ghost snapped, his eyes hard. "And if we don't move, we will be too." They emerged into an alley behind the orphanage, the city's lights twinkling like cold, distant stars. Isabelle's mind raced. Mercy dead, the children still trapped, the ledgers half still in Harrington's hands. The weight of it all pressed down on her, crushing, suffocating. For a moment she wanted to collapse, to let the darkness swallow her whole. Then she heard it. The children's whispers, clearer than ever. "Avenge us. Burn it down. Never forget." Isabelle straightened, her eyes burning with cold fire. "We're going to the mine," she said, her voice steady, lethal. "It's suicide," Ghost argued. "Then we die figured." "Hutting," Isabelle replied, her hand resting on the revolver at her hip. "Not like Mercy, not like the children, like wolves." Ghost stared at her, a flicker of respect in his gaze. The copper mine yawned like a festering wound in the mountainside, its entrance choked with scaffolding and searchlights that carved knives through the darkness. Isabelle Hartmann crouched behind a boulder, the ledgers half pressed to her chest, its edges digging into her ribs like accusation. Ghost moved like smoke beside her, his rifle glinting in the moonlight. "Guards every 20 feet, he murmured, his voice scraping like gravel. "Dogs, machine guns at the tunnel mouth. This isn't a mine, it's a fortress." "Fortresses fall," Isabelle replied, her eyes fixed on the children being herded toward the entrance. Small, shivering figures, their faces smudged with coal dust, their eyes wide with terror. "Anna was one of them," Ghost said, his voice cracking. "She'd be 16 now." "She's here," Isabelle whispered. "All of them are, and we're getting them out." The plan was madness, distraction, chaos, fire. Ghost would create the diversion, drawing the guards away from the main entrance. Isabelle would slip inside, find Harrington, retrieve the ledger's second half, and free the children. "If I'm not back in 10 minutes, Ghost said, checking his revolver, "you run, take the ledger, burn it all. I'm not leaving without you," Isabelle snarled. "Then don't die," Ghost replied, his eyes locking with hers, and then he was gone, melting into the shadows toward the mine's western flank. Isabelle counted the seconds, each one a lifetime. Then the night exploded. Gunfire ripped through the darkness, shouts erupted, and the searchlights swung wildly toward Ghost's position. "Now!" Isabelle hissed, sprinting toward the mine entrance. 2 guards turned, reaching for their rifles. Isabelle fired twice, both dropped. She dove into the tunnel just as machine gun fire strafed the entrance, chewing rock to dust. Inside, the air was thick with sulfur and despair. The tunnel plunged into darkness, the only light coming from flickering lanterns strung along the walls. Children's whimpers echoed, mixing with the groan of machinery and the distant crack of Ghost's rifle. Isabelle moved deeper, her boots splashing through puddles of grimy water, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She found them in a cavern the size of a cathedral, children chained to iron posts, their wrists raw, their faces hollow, foremen with whips and pistols paced among them, shouting orders. And at the center of it all, Harrington, a mountain of a man in a tailored suit, his face flushed with cruelty, the ledger's second half tucked under his arm. "Move them," he bellowed. "The train leaves in an hour." Isabelle stepped into the light, revolver raised. Harrington! He turned, his eyes widening in shock. You? Me, Isabelle replied. And the truth you tried to bury. Kill her! Harrington screamed. The foreman lunged, but Isabelle was faster. She fired, once, twice, dropping two of them. The third tackled her, his hands closing around her throat. Isabelle drove her knee into his groin, then smashed her revolver into his temple. He collapsed. Harrington scrambled for the ledger, but Isabelle was on him. She wrenched the ledger from his grasp, slamming him against the cavern wall. Where's the rest? She snarled. The names, the payments. Burn in hell, Harrington spat. After you, Isabelle replied, and shot him in the knee. He howled, collapsing. The names. In the office, he gasped. Safe. Combinations my daughter's birthday. Isabelle shoved him aside, grabbing the ledger's second half. As she did, the cavern shook, Ghost's dynamite detonating the mine's supports. Rocks rained from the ceiling. Out! Ghost roared, appearing at the tunnel entrance, his face streaked with blood and soot. The whole place is coming down! Isabelle grabbed the key, eyes from Harrington's belt, and began unlocking the children's chains. Go! Run! She screamed. They scrambled toward the entrance, their cries echoing through the collapsing mine. Denver burned that night, not with fire, but with the phosphorescent glow of truth. Isabelle Hartmann stood on a ridge overlooking the city, the ledger's ashes still clinging to her skin like a shroud. Below, the copper mine smoldered, its entrance a collapsed maw swallowing the last of Harrington's empire. Ghost leaned against a pine tree, his face a mask of exhaustion and blood. They'll call it an accident, he rasped, wiping grime from his rifle. A cave-in, tragic, but unavoidable. Let them lie, Isabelle replied, her voice hollow. The children know, the dead know, and I know. The children, 42 of them, emaciated and wide-eyed, huddled around a small campfire Ghost had built. Their silence was heavier than any scream. They were free, yes, but freedom tasted like ash. What happens to us now? A girl no older than 10 whispered, her eyes fixed on Isabelle. We survive, Isabelle said, kneeling beside her. And we remember. By dawn, the city's response was swift and brutal. The Denver Chronicle screamed, "Anarchist terrorists destroy copper mine, dozens killed." Below the headline, a sketch of Isabelle's face, wild-eyed, feral. The governor himself gave a speech, his voice thick with manufactured grief. These radicals prey on our progress, on our children. They will be hunted, they will be brought to justice. Justice. The word tasted like poison in Isabelle's mouth. She watched from the shadows as soldiers patrolled the streets, kicking down doors, interrogating anyone who'd ever spoken against Harrington or the mine. The children she'd freed were rounded up, shuffled into orphanages and workhouses. For their own safety, the authorities claimed. Safe. As if safety had ever existed in a world that sold children like cattle. Ghost found her in an abandoned warehouse, staring at a wall she'd covered in names. Anna, Klaus, Sophie, and 40 others. They're erasing us, Isabelle said, her fingers tracing Anna's name. Already the story's changing. We're not heroes. We're monsters. The truth never stays buried, Ghost replied, handing her a flask. Not really. It festers, it rots, and eventually it bursts. And who pays the price when it does? Isabelle shot back, her voice cracking. More children? More innocence? More ghosts? Ghost didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew the cost of truth. It was paid in blood, in silence, in the hollow eyes of children who'd seen too much. That night, Isabelle dreamed of Anna, not as a ghost, but as she'd been, alive, laughing, her hair whipping in the wind as she ran through a field of wildflowers. You did it, Anna whispered, her voice like wind chimes. You freed us. Not all of you, Isabelle sobbed in the dream. So many are still trapped, still forgotten. Then free them too, Anna replied, her image flickering like a candle in a storm. Burn it all, every last lie. Isabelle woke with a gasp, the dream's echoes clinging to her like spider webs. Ghost was already awake, sharpening his knife by the dim light of a lantern. "We need to move," he said without looking up. "The keepers are closing in. They've put a bounty on our heads, dead or alive." "Where do we go?" Isabelle asked, her voice raw. "West," Ghost replied. "Always west. Where the land is wild. Where the truth can't be so easily buried." As they packed their meager supplies, Isabelle heard the children's whispers again, not just Anna's, but all of them, a chorus of the lost, the broken, the forgotten. "Remember us," they seemed to say. "Avenge us. Never forget." "Always," Isabelle whispered into the dawn. "I swear it." They vanished into the mountains like smoke, leaving Denver to its lies, its corruption, its carefully constructed reality. But Isabelle carried the truth with her, not in a ledger, but it in her bones, her blood, her very soul. The system would try to bury her, to erase her, to turn her into a monster. But they couldn't erase the children. They couldn't erase the dead. 10 years later, the name Isabelle Hartmann was no longer a name. It was a ghost story whispered in the shadows of every corrupt city in America. In Denver, they said she rode with the wind, a spectral avenger hunting the men who sold children. In San Francisco, they claimed she'd become a nun, lighting candles for the dead in hidden chapels. In Chicago, they swore she'd been hanged as a witch, her body dumped in the river, her eyes still open. But the truth was wilder, darker, more dangerous. Isabelle Hartmann hadn't died. She'd evolved. She moved through the back alleys of New Orleans now, her hair streaked with silver, her face a roadmap of every betrayal, every bullet, every child's grave she'd carried. The ledger was long gone, burned, buried, scattered to the winds, but its truth lived in her bones. In the way she moved, in the way she watched, in the way she made powerful men tremble when she stepped into a room. The system had tried to bury her, to erase her, to turn her into a monster. But they'd failed. Because the truth doesn't die. It ferments, it festers, and when it bursts, it burns everything in its path. Isabelle stood tonight on the banks of the Mississippi, watching a cargo ship unload its human cargo. Children, chained and hollow-eyed, just like the ones she'd freed in Denver. The foreman barked orders, his face a mask of greed, his pockets heavy with blood money. And beside him, a man Isabelle knew all too well. "Ghost," she whispered, her voice like broken glass. He turned, his eyes widening in shock. "Isabelle?" "The one and only," she replied, her hand resting on the revolver at her hip. "Though I hear I'm a ghost these days." "You're supposed to be dead," Ghost snarled, his hand inching toward his own weapon. "Death couldn't silence me," Isabelle said. "What makes you think you can?" They stood there, two ghosts from a past that refused to die, surrounded by the cries of children who'd never known freedom. Ghost had sold out, taken Harrington's money, become the very thing they'd fought to destroy. "Why?" Isabelle asked, her voice cracking with betrayal. "Because the truth doesn't pay the bills," Ghost sneered. "Because the system always wins." Isabelle laughed, a raw, jagged sound that echoed across the water. "The system doesn't win, Ghost. It rots. And when it rots, it collapses. And we're the ones who light the match." She raised her revolver. Ghost raised his. But before either could fire, a shot rang out, from the shadows. Ghost collapsed, a bullet hole between his eyes. Isabelle spun, her weapon ready. A figure stepped forward, a young woman, no older than 20, her eyes burning with cold fire. "Mercy sent me," she said, "before she died. She said you'd need backup." Isabelle lowered her revolver, a flicker of something like hope in her chest. "Who are you?" "Call me Echo," the young woman replied, "because I carry the voices of the dead, and they're tired of whispering." Together, they freed the children. They burned the ship. They left Ghost's body as a message to the men who still thought they could profit from pain, and as the sun rose over New Orleans, Isabelle Hartmann looked at Echo and saw the future, a future where the truth wasn't just remembered, it was weaponized. "They'll come for us," Echo said, her voice steady. "Let them," Isabelle replied. "The truth remembers, and so do we."